Guy, I want to marry Madam Ireti. Ha! You want to end yourself? That woman that treated Emmanuel like trash? That was Emmanuel. I am Kelvin. I'm different. Guy, be careful. No, say I not tell you.
After Emmanuel, Madame Iriti's ex-young husband, whom she dealt with, disappeared from her life. Madame Iriti did not cry, she did not search for him, she did not even ask questions. Instead, she started searching for another fresh man. One evening, at an exclusive business event, her eyes fell on a young man standing alone at another table. His name was Kelvin, young, ambitious, and hungry for success. Madame Iriti walked up to him with her usual confidence. "I like you," she said plainly. "If you marry me, I'll take care of you. You'll never struggle again." Kelvin hesitated. "But you are old enough to be my mother," he said. "Age is just a number. Marry me and you will be shocked at how young I am at heart." He smiled. "It seems God has finally heard my prayers," he said. Within a week, Kelvin made his findings and knew exactly who Madame Iriti was, and he agreed to marry her. She has to learn a lesson, but Kelvin had a girl he was dating before that time, a young girl named Nora. But he saw Madame Iriti as his escape from poverty, just like Emmanuel. So he decided to break up with Nora. They have been together for just 3 months. When Kelvin told her he was breaking up with her, she froze. "Why?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Just like that." Kelvin looked at her without emotion. "Since I've been with you, what have I gained?" He replied coldly, "Instead, I'm the one always giving. I'm tired of suffering, let me go and cash out with people where no road." Nora burst into tears, but Kelvin did not look back. He followed Madame Iriti. When he told his friend that he was going to marry her, he shouted in shock, "That woman! The one who treated that guy called Emmanuel like trash. Didn't you hear what she did to him?" Kelvin laughed. "She won't treat me like that," he said confidently. "I'm different." His family warned him too, but he ignored them. Madame Iriti wanted to plan a wedding, but Kelvin told her it wasn't necessary. That a wedding would only draw undue attention. He told her all that mattered was that he was with her. She agreed, and just like that, Kelvin moved into Madame Iriti's mansion. The palace prison had found a new occupant. The very next morning, Madame Iriti was getting ready to go out. She told him, "Kelvin, wash the car. We are going out." Kelvin paused. He looked around the sitting room. Then he replied, "Who was doing it before I came?" Madame Iriti's eyes widened. "Are you talking to me like that?" she asked sharply. Kelvin shrugged slightly. "I don't see anyone else here," he said, looking around. Her face hardened. "Do it before I come back outside," she warned, "or you will face the consequences." Kelvin did not argue. He simply walked to the sitting room, poured himself a glass of wine, and sat down comfortably. Minutes later, Madame Iriti came out and saw the car untouched. Her anger rose. "Kelvin!" she snapped. She raised her hand to slap him, but he grabbed it mid-air. "In your entire life, don't ever try this again," he shouted as he dropped her hand roughly. He looked at her, not with fear, not with apology, but with calm authority. "Madam Wife," he said quietly, "if you want a driver or a houseboy, you can hire one." Silence filled the room. For clarity, he continued, his voice firm but controlled, "I came here as your partner, not your servant, and I advise you never to confuse the two again." Madame Iriti stared at him. For the first time in years, someone had spoken to her without trembling, without begging, without fear. Kelvin picked up his glass of wine and walked out of the room calmly, leaving her standing there in shock. And in that moment, Madame Iriti realized something terrifying. She had not brought another Emmanuel into her house, she had brought a man who was not afraid of her. And slowly, the predator began to feel threatened. That night, Madame Iriti did not sleep. Kelvin's calm defiance haunted her thoughts. She had expected him to beg, to apologize, to tremble after the incident, but he didn't. 3 days passed, and still, Kelvin moved around the house normally, calm, distant, and uninterested. They lived under the same roof like strangers, each minding their own world. Kelvin did not care, and that unsettled Madame Iriti more than rebellion ever could. On the fourth day, Madame Iriti called him into her room. Her voice was firm. "Kelvin, come here." He walked in slowly. She looked at him with authority. "I need you to perform your manly duties," she said. "How can you go 3 whole days without asking for my touch?" And Kelvin looked at her calmly. "Because I have self-control. As a matter of fact, I'm not interested," he said. "Why is that?" she asked, irritated. "Because you crossed the line," he replied, her brows furrowed. "Crossed what line?" "You shouted at me, raised a hand at me and tried to order me like a houseboy," he said firmly. "If we are partners, not master and servant, then respect must exist. You owe me an apology." Madame Iriti laughed bitterly. "Look at this small boy, do you know who I am?" she snapped. "I am rich. I rule this house." Kelvin nodded slightly. "Then let your wealth satisfy you tonight," he said quietly, turning to leave. His words hit her like thunder. She moved after him instinctively. "Kelvin!" she called. He stopped. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Silence filled the room. Then, slowly, Madame Iriti spoke, something she had not done in years. "Fine," she said coldly. "I went too far. I'm sorry." Kelvin looked at her steadily. "Good," he replied. "That's all I wanted." He walked away calmly. For the first time in her life, Madame Iriti felt something she had never allowed herself to feel: humiliation. Exactly 1 month after Kelvin moved into the mansion, he called her for a serious conversation. They sat in the living room, facing each other. "You promised to take care of me," Kelvin said calmly. "I didn't come here to entertain anyone." "What exactly is the deal? Why aren't you talking about setting me up?" Madame Iriti's temper flared. She stood up angrily. "Who do you think you are talking to?" she shouted. Kelvin stood up too. His voice was quiet, but sharp. "Don't shout at me," he said firmly. "You made a promise, fulfill it." Madame Iriti froze. No man had ever shut her down like that. The room went silent, and in that silence, she realized something frightening. Kelvin was not afraid of her wealth. He was not dazzled by her power. He was not broken like Emmanuel. He was challenging her kingdom, and slowly, the queen of control was losing her grip. She pointed at Kelvin with pride and scoffed. "The food you eat, the house you sleep in, the life you enjoy, isn't that enough care?" Kelvin stared at her quietly. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he smiled faintly. "Are you for real?" "Well, sorry I asked," he said calmly. Madame Iriti felt satisfied. To her, that smile meant surrender. She thought she had won, but Kelvin's smile was not surrender. It was calculation. From that day, Kelvin changed. He became gentle, respectful, obedient. He praised Madame Iriti. He defended her. He acted like the perfect loyal partner. Madame Iriti was pleased. For the first time in years, she felt safe. She trusted him. One evening, Madame Iriti sat in her study, frustrated with her laptop. "Why is this thing not working?" she snapped. Kelvin paused at the door. "Let me check it," he said calmly. She hesitated but pushed the laptop toward him. Within minutes, he fixed the problem. Madame Iriti stared at the screen in surprise. "You're good with computers," she said. Kelvin smiled slightly. From that day, she began calling him whenever she had issues with emails, payments, and documents. One night, as she struggled to access her company's account, Kelvin said softly, "If you want, I can help you organize your password so you won't lose access again." After a brief silence, she nodded, "Fine." And without realizing it, Madame Iriti opened the door she had guarded all her life. Kelvin didn't break in, she let him in, and slowly, she gave him access to her finances, her accounts, and her business dealings, and since she always sent him to carry out transactions, he knew her PIN. Kelvin never rushed. He waited, he studied, he planned. But Madame Iriti noticed nothing. She was too busy enjoying the illusion of control, and one day, he emptied her bank account. He used a trusted associate to open the account. He wired the money to making it difficult to link the funds directly to him. Madame Iriti was in her office when the alerts dropped in one after the other. She fainted right there and was rushed to the hospital. When she woke up, she asked, "Where is Kelvin?" But Kelvin was gone. Not a message, not a trace, not a goodbye. She picked her phone to call him, but he had blocked her everywhere. Too late, she realized she had been played. Her business accounts were empty. Gradually, investors withdrew, customers disappeared and staff resigned. Madame Iriti ran from office to office in confusion. Her calls went unanswered. Her lawyers were helpless and her empire crumbled in silence. Her children confronted her 2 weeks later. "Mother, we warned you," one of them said bitterly. "Yes, our father treated you badly. But must you punish every young man because of him?" Madame Iriti could not answer. Her voice was gone, her power was gone, her pride was gone. Left with nothing, she began living on what her children could afford to give her. The mansion became quiet. She couldn't even maintain the house or the cars. The queen of control had become an ordinary woman, and bitterness became her only companion. Far away, Kelvin built himself a new house with part of the money he took. He leaned back and smiled. Mission accomplished, he whispered. He did not go to Madame Iriti because he loved her. He went because he had heard Emmanuel's story. He wanted to teach her a lesson. Madame Iriti became darker and thinner. Meanwhile, Emmanuel, her first victim who ran away before Kelvin dusted his certificates and began searching for a job. When none came, he humbled himself and accepted work as a security officer in a company. "It is better to work with my hands and earn good money than working in slavery under Madame Iriti," he told himself. He worked diligently. One day, the CEO noticed him. They asked for his credentials. Satisfied with his papers, they upgraded him to work as an assistant logistics manager. Slowly, Emmanuel rebuilt his life. He supported his sisters. He healed. He found love again. He married a young woman who respected him, and happiness returned to his life. One afternoon, Emmanuel went to the market with his pregnant wife. As he walked past a vegetable stall, he saw a familiar face, older, tired, ordinary. Madame Iriti. No luxury, no jewelry, no expensive perfume, just a woman. Emmanuel moved closer. "I think I know you," he said gently. Madame Iriti froze. She looked up. She recognized him immediately. Shame filled her eyes. "I don't know you," she replied quickly, trying to walk away. Emmanuel smiled sadly. "Ehen. Your voice confirms it," he said softly. "Madame Iriti. My ex-wife. The woman who greed and laziness pushed me to marry against my mother's advice, the woman who refused to help me despite having so much money. Why are you looking like this?" Madame Iriti could not speak. She looked at Emmanuel and his pregnant wife, her face burned with shame. She turned and ran out of the market. Emmanuel smiled, held his wife's hand and walked away quietly. He had already moved on. That night, Madame Iriti cried until her eyes were swollen. For the first time, she understood her mistake. "I should have waited for a man my age after the death of my wicked husband," she whispered. "Someone who would love me, not boys young enough to be my sons." But, instead, I allowed revenge to destroy my life. Revenge on men who hadn't offended me. Now Kelvin has destroyed me. But it was too late. Emmanuel had moved on. Kelvin had vanished. Her power was gone. Only regret remained. One she would live with forever. This story reminds us that unhealed pain can turn a victim into a villain. When people refuse to heal from their past wounds, they often end up hurting innocent people in the present. Revenge is a dangerous seed. When planted, it grows into destruction, not only for others, but also for the one who planted it. Wealth cannot replace love, respect, or emotional maturity. Money may attract people, but it cannot build genuine relationships or lasting happiness. Marriage contracted on the ground of revenge. An eradication of poverty is one doomed to fail as it was started on a wrong reason. This brings us to the end of this story. Thank you for watching. We meet again to share another lovely story, but until then, bye.